Hello and welcome to this video presentation. Today we're going to be looking at the installation process for zend-server Cluster Manager. What zend-server Cluster Manager is designed to do is designed to take individual zend-server nodes that can be running independently of all the other nodes that are running in your environment and make them kind of aggregated into one cluster. What that means is that you can have cluster-wide settings, you can have cluster-wide event aggregation, and a couple of other things that allows you to see your application kind of as a whole, even when it's running across multiple machines. So what we're going to do today is we're just going to show and give you a quick demonstration about how you actually go through installing zend-server Cluster Manager and getting individual nodes actually integrated as part of that individual cluster. Before I do that, I'm going to give you a quick rundown on my environment. I have obviously running on Vista here, and I have CentOS running 64-bit. But on CentOS, I have two individual virtual machines that are running. We have Zen 1 and Zen 2. Those are already running Zen server as in an individual node. And so if we take a look here, we see zen1.local, and I can log into that, or I can go to this one. Both are Zen server instances, but you see here Zen 2, Zen 1. These are the two individual nodes. They're running as a virtual machine right now, but this is more for demonstration purposes. You can obviously do this if you want, but Zen Server Cluster Manager is intended to work with virtualization very well. It's intended to work with actual hardware very well as the cloud. It's designed to work within the cloud as well. So now that we have a little bit of an understanding about what our environment looks like, let's actually go through the installation process of zend-server Cluster Manager. On CentOS, it's very easy. Yum install zend-server Cluster Manager, and we hit enter. Now what this is doing is going to a local repository that I have installed here. It's a little bit different from what you would see when you actually go through the installation process yourself. Right now, because it's local, obviously you wouldn't be able to access it when you go through the installation process, but by the time you're actually seeing this, we will have documentation out there on how to actually connect by setting up a repository in your Yum directory or apt, or using MSI, or whatever it is, whichever environment that you're actually running on. So we're just finishing up some of the installation process here, stopping the Cluster Manager GUI, which is running under Lite, just like as we had in Zen Server. So what we're going to do then is go to our tab here, and just like Zen Server, the GUI listens on port 10,081. And since this is our first time through, we're going to have to set it up and install it. So we're going to agree to the end user license agreement. Right, of course we're going to agree to it. Click on next, set up a password. This password is the one that's going to be used to connect into the Cluster Manager itself. Click on next. Then the next thing we need to do is set up our license and registration if we're going to be getting newsletters, which you probably already are. There's two different licenses that you need to use, one for the Cluster Manager and then one for the individual nodes. So I've got some licenses here. This one I'm pasting in there. First of all, the order number is just my email address. We'll say it's the same as the Cluster Manager. And then here's another one as well. We'll just copy and paste that in. All of these are expiring before Cluster Manager actually gets released. So don't worry about trying to use them on your own system, because by that time they probably won't work. So I hit next. And the next thing we need to do is set up a database connection. In the original Zen server, a lot of the data was being aggregated and stored, well, not aggregated, but just being stored in an SQLite database. Well, SQLite doesn't work well with large numbers of machines, and so what we did instead here is used the Zen server, or not the Zen server, but MySQL for handling all that information. So what we need to do is put in a database hostname. I'm going to do zscm.local, which is the name of the public-facing interface. It can't be listening on just the local host because the individual zend-server nodes need to be able to communicate with this database. And so while you don't want it to be public-facing in terms of the internet, you want it on an accessible interface that your individual nodes are able to connect in with. So from here, we're going to hit finish, but we're actually going to see an error because we weren't able to connect in with our database. That's because we haven't got it installed. So you can actually have your installation running on a different server here as long as everybody can connect in with it. So what we'll do is yum install MySQL server, which will take a little bit of time, but that's all right. I've got a fast connection here. Yeah, 2 megs a second we hit at the end. We're also going to need the MySQL command line tools in just a bit. No, they're already installed, so we're actually pretty good to go there. So now, if I try and click on finish, well, actually I guess I have to start it. Service MySQLD start. All right, now we'll try it. Then we see the system could not connect to the supplied database to create the user and schema. This is because we need to actually grant access to this. We're connecting over a public interface, and that means that by default you're not going to have access. So if we do like MySQL h zscem.local, we're going to get this host or this connection denied. So what we'll do is we'll just connect in, and I've already done this once before. We'll just give a grant all privileges. It used to be a privilege that allows access through the outside machine. Right now, we don't have a password on there, and we're using root, which you really shouldn't be doing. But I'm just doing this for a demo here. But in your actual environment, you would obviously want to have some level of actual security implemented here. I'm just doing this to make things easier. So we flush the privileges, and we'll connect. Yep, so we're able to connect. And now we'll go back to our database connection, hit finish one more time, and our zend-server cluster manager is now up and running. Now the thing that we want to do though is we want to now add the individual nodes to our cluster. So we see server status, there are no servers connected, so we'll click here to add a server to the cluster. So the first thing we'll do, give it a name, zen1, give it the address, zen1.local, and then the password. This is the actual GUI password that you used when you actually installed the zend-server instances on the individual nodes. So I'll type that in, and I'll click on Add Server. This will usually take a little bit of time, not too much, I mean a couple of seconds, but as you can see it takes a little bit of time to actually do that. And we'll then, it says here this service PHP needs to be restarted, so the way we'll do that is to click on Restart PHP. And again, because we're dealing with remote connections, it usually takes a little bit more time, but we see that we're actually fine now. We've got this one installed, Zen1. But what looks a little bit different though, when we actually go to our instance here, you'll see now that we actually can't directly connect to our zend-server instance, our individual node. Which, when you're using Cluster Manager, isn't really what you want to do anyways. You want to manage everything through this individual GUI here. So we'll just go in then, we'll add our other server, zen2, zen2.local, and put in our password for connecting there. And we'll click on Add Server. And again, we have to wait a little bit while it loads up and does all of its stuff, all of its magic. And we see now that both of them need to be restarted. We click on Restart PHP. And now all of the nodes in the cluster are actually going through this restart, and now we're pretty much good. We have now all of our servers installed from the node. We can't actually access them anymore. So you see this, we went now to the GUI here, and that is pretty much it. We've got our node, we've got our cluster, and we're actually ready to start doing some work on it. But that's something we'll look at in another video. Thank you for taking the time to watch this one. Again, very simple, very short, but that's really one of the benefits of having a zend-server cluster manager installed, is that it's really designed to make your life a lot easier. So with that, thank you for your time, and I hope to see you at another Zend video sometime in the future.